Welcome to the My Curious Colleague podcast with your host, me, Denise Fineri. We'll be talking all things consumer relations with a focus on consumer product goods organizations and the brand specialist and analyst roles and responsibilities. So, if you like CPGs like I like CPGs, marketing, insights, and caring deeply for your consumers, well, take a listen. Hello, my curious colleagues. My guest today is my colleague, Chris Drury, Director of Customer Care at Blount Fine Foods. Today's chat with Chris is going to be third in my series on the R word. Yes, recalls. Specifically, we'll be talking about the tools and technology that can be enabled in the event of a recall. We're going to get into about 4 different touch points in the flow of recall technology that can really come in handy using digital self-service, including a bot, so exciting, to help consumers feel cared for, could help reduce call volume to more traditional channels. And also we're going to talk a little bit about some of the reporting applications during a recall that could provide timely reporting to, for example, the regulatory agency like the FDA or the USDA or your internal leadership. And also a report that could help you understand, I'll call it the footprint of your product when it comes to traceability at retailers, markets, distribution centers, etc. As always, Chris is informative and transparent, which is so cool. So let's listen in to my conversation with my colleague, Chris Drury. Hi, Chris, and welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Denise. Thank you for having me again.
Of course, of course. What's always been interesting to me is your passion for learning and for sharing, even when it comes to the R word, as I said, recall. So I so appreciate that. Just wanted to get that out. So let's fast forward a bit on this scenario. Let's say a recall has been determined as necessary. Okay. So we're at that point in the continuum. And I know there's stuff that goes on before this, and we can get into that. I'd love to have you back for another episode on that. But tell me about maybe at this point in the continuum, a basic tech tool that our colleagues could start out.
Well, once we determine that a recall will be happening, we have to run a shipment trace report. That allows us to identify, based upon the affected lot code, which of our customers received the product. It also identifies more specifically which POs from those customers the product was shipped against. It identifies how many cases we shipped, and it also identifies the specific distribution center location that received those affected cases. We run that here out of our ERP system, which is an enterprise resource planning. If for those of you that may not know what that acronym stands for us, we have a product called X3. It's kind of a mid-size business ERP system, but the more notable ones others may know are SAP and Oracle. So essentially, it's what your organization runs on for your accounting systems, your warehousing systems, your order management systems.
Mm-hmm. So this X3, is it capital X, the letter X, and then the number 3? Okay. So that's
Yes,
hitting
it is.
against, because it's not hitting against your consumer care CRM, correct? Right? It's hitting against
Correct.
some.
As an order comes in from a customer, our customer service team enters that order under the PO
Yeah.
number. If I have to run a shipment trace report, it's going to, and I input the lot code that's affected and the item, the specific SKU, it's going to
Yeah.
tell me based on that SKU and that lot code, these are the respective purchase orders from our customers that we actually ship product against.
So then you'll know where the potential effective product is sitting at that moment in time, right? Okay. So
Correct.
I know, well, first of all, you're very savvy, um, consumer care and in reporting analytics. So I know that it makes sense for you to get your hands in this. You're also the recall coordinator for Blount Fine Foods, which is cool. But to me, I'm just wondering if I'm not the recall coordinator for my company, what would be the benefit to say, hey, we'll run that?
Well, in some organizations, the customer care lead is not necessarily the recall coordinator, but
Right.
ultimately, this becomes an engagement between the organization and the customers that received affected product.
Yeah.
And we have two pieces to our business. One is the food service side, and one is the retail side. We run that report the same way, regardless of which marketplace it goes into. However, downstream on the retail side, you not only need to identify those retailers, but then you're going to have the whole direct to consumer piece that adds on top of that. So all of those engagements typically reside within the customer care, customer experience purview. So if you're not the recall leader, someone high up in customer care really needs to be part of the crisis management team. So at the very least, they're aware of it.
Absolutely.
There may be someone else in the organization that is responsible for running the shipment trace report.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's the customer care function that really should be managing those communications outward to those affected customers.
Yeah. I think what I like about it is it kind of gives you that control, because that report is really, to me, it feels like the crux of everything that comes next. So then once that report is run, there's some other steps that happen behind the scenes. Well, not really behind the scenes, but I know there's an adverse event document that we had chatted about. We're looking at a draft of a press release that needs to get aligned to some internal documentation. So let's pretend for this conversation. So that's all been figured out and in line too. So what's next when we think about tech in this recall journey?
Well, next in my mind is the part where we leverage our CRM because we're going to be sending out notifications to those affected customers. And
Oh,
those are
okay.
actually coming out of our CRM in customer care. So we take the shipment results and who those
Okay.
customers are, and
Hmm.
we identify at those customers who is the point of contact for recall.
Hmm.
We then draft the communication to those affected customers and we launch them from our customer care platform.
And what is the tool that does that? These the standard tools that you always have in your CRM?
We create a template within Amplify Agent. That's the platform we're on. It was formerly Astute Agent. Um, so within there, we create a recall affected customer template. We load in those affected customers as contacts. And then from each of them, we create the notification and we send it out. And Denise, the real important part to this is once we do that, there will be an awful lot of dialogue back and forth with those customers because they all have a set of pretty similar requirements, but then there's a variety beyond that that each organization does that might be specific to their own. So we're able to manage that leveraging the CRM platform so that every email back and forth is getting captured within that record and we can follow the thread. And if there's any additional documentation that customer needs, we there again can launch it and send it out of the CRM platform to them, and it
Okay,
documents what was sent within that contact record.
got it. And customers, you mean literally the customer, the retailer,
The
versus
retailer,
the
yeah. So
consumer.
for
Yeah.
us, that'll be, Walmart, Target, Publix, Sprouts Markets, Stop and
Yep.
Shop, Kroger, all of those folks.
Okay. You guys play, such a key role. I mean, I guess I should say all consumer care plays such a key role, but you um, really get your hands in there. What's next? Let me not guess because I'll guess wrong. What's next then in terms of technology that you
So while
employ?
this Yeah, so while that is happening, concurrently, we are also building. Um, we have a website that's already pre-established. that we basically hide from public access on a micro page. And we also have a digital self-service bot that we've already pre-built that is also hidden from public access. So at this point in time, we take the details that come from that particular recall. We try and align the website information that we're putting out there with the public press release so that they mirror each other. And then the digital self-service bot, we will build essentially a logic pathway in terms of a series of questions to gather appropriate information from consumers. So that's on the retail side. So we're going to leverage both the a website as a landing page for the recall, as well
Mhm.
as a digital self-service bot to help manage the volume of contacts for the recall.
Yeah. So the website is a little microsite page. You may have said that's sort of
Yes.
at the ready. And who built that for you? Is that somebody over on the brand? And yeah, who would build this little microsite for you?
So the customer care, me specifically, worked with our marketing team as well as our web team to
Yeah,
build that microsite and have it ready to go with the basic information that is going to always appear on every recall. And then we just fill in those details when we have the adverse event, such as
yeah.
adding pictures of the packaging, adding
Mhm.
more specific retailer locations that were involved in it, those sorts of details that you would also commonly find in the press release with the FDA or USDA. We're not going to put anything different than that in there. We want to.
Yep.
That's why we have to wait to that moment in time until we know we're a go with one of those regulatory bodies, because at that
Yeah.
point we also have an idea of what that press release is going to look like and what the scope of the recall is. So at that point, we go back and engage the marketing and the web team. We have them help us with the microsite and get that prepared to go. They're going to also add a banner across all of our corporate websites that directs consumers to that landing page. So those will both get launched simultaneously once the press release has gone out. We
Yeah.
also will work with our admin team for our customer care platform. They also help us manage our chatbots. So we'll work with them at the same time we're working with the marketing and web team, so that we can build out that digital self-service bot along with all the associated flows back into the CRM, which includes, using as much automation as possible to populate records, and also populate what the response letter would be associated with that record, and any compensation that's appropriate for that record.
Hmm. Aside from it sounding very cool, I grew up with the Jetsons. So anything that has botted it, one of the good bots, not that one bot that would then go awry and then they would be like the evil bot. You know that episode. Anyway, but aside from bots sounding very cool, what is the overall benefit during a recall for employing this self-service bot that we're talking about?
Well, it allows for 24/7 service first and
Okay.
foremost. That's one of the real benefits to it, is if you have, because we all know in customer care these days that consumers want to reach out to us whenever they feel compelled to do so,
Yeah.
right? So recalls are always difficult to gauge what the volume will look like. So the digital self-service chatbot gives you a mechanism to be open 24/7 for that consumer to walk through that flow and ultimately get to an endpoint that says you have affected or unaffected product.
And then that
The
triggers
second
off of, oh, excuse
It
me.
does, it does, and then the second really big benefit, that's kind of a partnership to that, is it removes a lot of contact volume off of your agents.
Because it's going through the secret microsite website, coming through that way versus, say, the phone, the
Correct,
telephone.
correct.
Okay.
And there is always, it's important to keep in mind that Sometimes you're going to have contacts through the recall that still need a live agent to have a more deeper conversation with a consumer. So you have to make sure that you allow for that fall out of the chatbot into a live agent situation. So if that occurs during business hours, a live agent becomes involved immediately. If it occurs outside of the business hours, the consumer is advised. They receive a message that we need to talk with you further, so to
Hmm.
speak. Please provide, we collect their contact information and advise them that one of our team members will call them first thing the next business day.
So what I was hearing, it takes volume off of your more traditional channels like phone, but it's still allowing for person-to-person care when needed. Um, and then I think also like with a recall, and I'm not as savvy in this area, so that's why I love talking to folks like you. I know that that's a tricky part of it, this forecast of, okay, depending on the scope and size of the recall itself, what that means in terms of contact volume and hence staffing. So the bot allows you also to staff as needed. Or tell me more
Yeah,
about
and
that. I'm not sure if I'm articulating that correctly.
and we can gauge. I mean, it is always somewhat guesswork. So I think one thing that hasn't yet been said that I always in my head, it's implicit to me, but I'll state it blatantly, is that the whole goal you need to keep in mind in having customer care managing the outward bound communications for the recall is to really get it into a pretty well defined channel that
Hmm.
is removed from your normal business. So the bot allows for that. Having a partner that can scale with you in terms of live agents that are is a different group of live agents than your normal business is also an
Yeah.
important part of that. So we do leverage that component within the recall also.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying that for me. And then the last sort of area I thought we could touch on, unless I'm missing something, is the reporting technology, both to internally and also out to a regulatory body. Can you talk about those two or
Sure.
three?
Sure. So of course every case is getting every contact is getting coded accordingly within the system. So one of those keys to the coding of that record or that contact is to have a field in your CRM where you can call out those recall contacts. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that, as an example, is here at Blount, I have a field that resides on the user interface for every single contact we have, and it's a Blount priority field. That field for me identifies by letter A, B, C, and R. An A for me is illness injury. A B
Yeah.
for me is foreign material, extraneous material, and label issues because those groups have some pretty high business risk implications. So we like to be able to use our reporting to just look at the A's or the B's. So the R now allows us to pull the recall contacts in our reporting pretty easily. And then from that, typically what we're doing is we're looking at this in two ways. One is we have reporting built in SQL Server reporting services, which is, the acronym is SSRS. A lot of people refer to it that way. Those are more structured reports that go out. We can schedule those on the back end so that it runs at a certain frequency and pushes it out in an email format and delivers a PDF version of the report to that recipient group. Um, Typically, which would be kind of management and food safety, and then food safety can use that for their communications with the USDA and the FDA. We also will use Power BI. It's newer for us. We used to use Tableau
Right.
for dashboards, and that's more real time when we get into something like Power BI, where we can actually call out the recall and see the contacts and see how many contacts that we've been getting into the contact center.
And that Power BI is for like your internal reporting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that allows us to gauge where we stand, what the volume looks like, how much of the volume has been self-service, how much of the volume has been calls into the recall phone number, and how much of it actually went through digital self-service and fell out to a live agent conversation.
Got it. And who has set up that Power BI? Is that something you've set up the query or the dash, however you want to call that? Or do
We
you
we
have to go
so
outside for
I
that?
Yeah, we have a separate business intelligence team here at Blount.
Mm.
So I work with them on any type of reporting that I need, whether it's in Tableau, Power BI, SSRS. I work directly with that team. They have the developers, the report writers, and they'll build those reports or dashboards for us based upon what it is that I set for expectations, requirements, and what we want to see, when we want to see it, how we want to see it. Do we want it emailed, not emailed? All of
Right.
those wonderful little details.
Nice to have that partnership internal, especially in a crisis situation. But probably you have this already developed and it's just sitting there. If I know you, something's developed.
Yeah, it's really important. I can speak for food processing companies pretty darn well because I've got experience with both FDA and USDA and some, the state health departments.
Mm-hmm.
I can't necessarily speak towards someone that's more in other types of consumer products. I'm sure they have other
Yeah.
regulatory bodies that they're dealing with that have their own set of requirements.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to really have these tools already built as part of your crisis management program.
Yeah.
Because the USDA, for instance, when we have to go through an event with them, it moves very, very quickly.
Yep. Sage advice. Sage advice. All right. So we're coming to the end of the podcast and just wanted to double check you're still up for sticking around for the double secret bonus question.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, cool. And that, just to give folks a hint on that, it's about a upcoming speaking gig that you're going to be that you're going to be speaking at. So that's enough of the hint. I'm going to keep the rest of it secret. So, thank you for sharing all the technology information and your point of view. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. I always enjoy sharing because best practices help everybody.
Yeah, agreed. If you've learned even a kernel of an idea or was inspired by this episode, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcast. Be sure to share out the hashtag CPGCX because CPGCX really and truly rocks.
You have been listening to the My Curious Colleague podcast with Denise Vanieri. Thank you for your time.